When my son-in-law told me to stop talking at my own dinner table, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fist down. I just looked at him for a long moment, then at my daughter sitting beside him, and I said, quietly, "I think we need to have a different kind of conversation." 3 weeks later, when the locks were changed and the driveway was empty for the first time in 8 months, my daughter called from a budget motel in Brampton asking me to please reconsider. I let it go to voicemail. I made myself a cup of tea, and for the first time since they'd moved in, I slept through the whole night. My wife passed 4 years ago. Lung cancer, 7 months from diagnosis to the end, which is both not enough time and somehow too much time to say goodbye properly. We'd been married 31 years. Sheila was the kind of woman who remembered the names of every neighbor's dog within a week of moving somewhere new. She would have known what to do about all of this. She would have seen it coming long before I did. I live in a semi-detached on Maple Ridge Road in Oakville, Ontario. 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard with a gas barbecue I use from May to October without apology. I paid off the mortgage 2 years before Sheila died, which was one of the few pieces of good timing in that entire period. After she was gone, the house felt enormous. My daughter, Colleen, would call every Sunday. She lived in Mississauga with her husband, a man named Trent, who worked in sales of some kind that was always described vaguely and never seemed to produce consistent income. Colleen was a dental hygienist. Steady work, good hours. She was the one keeping them afloat, though she never said so directly. The offer came on a Sunday in late October. Trent had been let go from his position. Colleen was 3 months pregnant. They needed somewhere to stay while they sorted things out. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I want to be honest about that because I've had a lot of time to think about it since. I wasn't naive. I'd seen the dynamic between them at family dinners. The way Trent spoke over people. The way Colleen's eyes would flick to him before she finished a thought. Like she was waiting for permission to have an opinion. But she was my daughter, and she was pregnant, and the house had 4 extra rooms sitting empty. What kind of father says no to that? They moved in the first weekend of November. Colleen had boxes of maternity clothes and books about natural childbirth. Trent had a gaming setup that took 3 hours to assemble in the spare room and required a dedicated circuit. My electrician charged me $400 to install. I didn't say anything. It was a one-time expense. People need their hobbies. By December, I had started to understand the shape of what I'd agreed to. Trent did not look for work in any way I could observe. He woke up around 11. He spent the afternoons on the computer in a room I couldn't enter because, as Colleen explained once, the headset made it hard to hear if someone knocked. He ate whatever was in the refrigerator. He left dishes in the sink. He used the good towels, the ones from Sheila's linen closet that I'd been keeping because they were thick Egyptian cotton and she'd loved them, and he left them damp on the bathroom floor. I picked them up. I didn't say anything. Christmas was tense. My son Philip, actually, no, I need to remember. There is no one named Philip in this story. My son, whose name is Kieran, came up from Hamilton for 3 days with his partner. Kieran noticed things immediately. On Boxing Day, when we were alone washing dishes, he said to me, "Dad, how long is this actually happening for?" I didn't have an answer. By January, I had started keeping a small notebook in the kitchen drawer, not out of obsession, more out of a kind of tired precision. I recorded grocery receipts because I had given Colleen my supplementary credit card when she'd asked if she could pick up a few things, and somehow the few things had become the primary way they ate. I recorded the utility bills. Our household expenses had jumped significantly. Gas alone was up 40%, because Trent liked the house warm. I like it at 19 degrees. He liked it at 23. There were 3 months where I put on a sweater in my own living room because I had started, without fully realizing it, to feel like I was the guest. In February, Colleen asked if we could convert the basement into a more comfortable space for them. "Just paint," she said. "Maybe new flooring." The baby was coming in April and they'd need somewhere private. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it. The answer was yes, because the baby was real and the need was real. I hired a contractor, $11,000. I told myself it was an investment in the house. The baby came in April. A girl, red-faced and furious and absolutely perfect. I held her in the hospital room and thought about Sheila, about how much she would have wept, about how much I was weeping, quietly, into the little pink blanket the nurses had wrapped around this child who did nothing wrong and whose arrival I was genuinely glad for, even surrounded by everything else that was happening. They named her something I'll get to. The baby was not the problem. The baby was never the problem. In May, with a newborn in the house, I developed some reasonable expectations. I asked that dishes not be left overnight in the sink because of fruit flies. I asked that the back door be locked before bed because we'd had a raccoon issue in the yard. I asked that the laundry room be cleared by a certain hour on Thursdays because that was when I did my own washing, and I needed the machine. These were not unreasonable things. I had written them down calmly on a sheet of paper and left it on the kitchen counter. Trent found this mildly hilarious. He said to Colleen, while I was in the next room, "Your dad left us a rule sheet, like we're in elementary school." Colleen laughed. It was a careful, uncomfortable laugh, the kind that's designed to agree without fully committing. But she laughed. I put the notepad away. I stopped writing things down. By July, the credit card statement arrived, and I sat at the kitchen table with it for a long time. $1,740 in June alone. Restaurants, streaming services, a new piece of gaming equipment, clothing. Trent was still not employed. I knew this because he was in the house every day, and because Colleen, when I asked gently how the job search was going, would say something like, "He's exploring some options," in the same tone she used to tell me she'd eaten her vegetables at 8 years old. Technically responsive, entirely unconvincing. I called the bank and reduced the credit limit on the supplementary card. Not canceled, reduced, a reasonable step. Trent found out within hours. I don't know how. He came into the kitchen while I was reading and sat down across from me with the specific body language of a man who believes he is being reasonable and wronged simultaneously. "I think there's been some kind of mix-up with the card," he said. "No mix-up," I said. "I adjusted the limit. That's going to cause some problems for us this month." I set my book down. Trent. I've been covering every expense in this house for 8 months. Rent, utilities, groceries, the basement renovation, the electrical work in the spare room. I haven't asked you to contribute a cent. Reducing the credit limit on a card attached to my account is within my rights. He looked at me the way people look at malfunctioning technology. Confused, slightly offended, as though my refusal to simply continue performing correctly was itself the problem. "I'm between positions," he said. "That's temporary." "I know," I said. "So is this arrangement." He left the room. That night, Colleen came downstairs after the baby was asleep. She sat at the table where he'd sat, in almost the same posture, and I thought about how marriage does that to people. How two people start to carry each other's habits. "Dad," she said. "He's stressed. He's trying. I understand that. You're making him feel like a burden." I looked at her, this woman who I'd driven to soccer practice for 6 years, who I'd sat with in the hospital at 17 when she had her appendix out, who I'd helped move 4 times in her 20s. "Colleen." I reduced the limit on a credit card. I didn't say anything unkind. I didn't raise my voice. "It's the way you do things," she said. "The way you leave notes, the way you sit and wait, like you're documenting everything. It's passive-aggressive. Passive-aggressive." The documentation of a man trying to maintain some structure in his own home had become a character flaw. "I'll try to be more direct," I said. I was more direct. The following week, when Trent left the back door unlocked at 2 in the morning, and I came downstairs to find it standing slightly open, I knocked on their basement door and said, clearly, that I needed the back door locked at night for security reasons, and could he please do that? He appeared in the doorway squinting, the gaming headset still around his neck. "Yeah," he said. "Sure, sorry." And he shuffled to the back door and locked it. 3 nights later it was open again. I locked it myself. I went back to bed. I lay there in the dark and thought about Sheila, the way I often did when I couldn't sleep. I thought about how she would have handled this, and I genuinely couldn't picture it, because I didn't think it would have gotten this far. Not because she was harder than me, because she was clearer. She would have said, in October, before they even moved in, "We'd love to have you. Here's what that looks like." I had not done that. That was on me. The dinner that changed things happened on a Tuesday in August. I'd made a proper meal. Roast chicken, roasted vegetables. The kind of dinner that takes an actual afternoon to put together. Colleen used to love this. It was one of Sheila's recipes, the kind that makes the whole house smell like something good is happening. The baby was in her little bouncy seat on the kitchen floor. Colleen was at the table. Trent arrived from the basement at 6:40, which was later than I'd asked, and sat down without a word. I was talking. I was telling Colleen about a conversation I'd had with my brother in Victoria, who'd been having some health issues, nothing serious but worrying, and I wanted to talk it through. It was the kind of conversation I used to have at this table all the time. Just family. Just dinner. Trent picked up his phone. I kept talking. Colleen was listening mostly. Her eyes went to Trent's phone a couple of times, then Trent said, without looking up, "Can you maybe keep it down a bit? I'm trying to concentrate." Silence. Colleen set down her fork. I felt something move through me that I can only describe as the final degree of heat before water changes state. Not boiling, just the instant before. "I'm sorry," I said. "Just," he gestured vaguely. "The level. It's a lot." I looked at my daughter. She didn't say anything. That was the moment, I think. Not what Trent said. What Colleen didn't say. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. My voice was very even. I finished my dinner. I cleared the table. I washed the dishes while they sat in the living room, and I heard the television come on, and I dried each dish with the care of someone who is deciding something. The next morning I called Kieran. "I'm thinking of asking them to leave," I said. "Thank God," said Kieran. "I want to do it properly. What do I need to know?" Kieran, who has a level head and works in property management, walked me through the basics. In Ontario, if someone has been residing in your home for more than a year, the rules get complicated. We were at 9 months. He recommended I give written notice, formally, 60 days, and document it clearly. He also said, "Make sure you have records of everything, Dad. All the expenses, everything." I went to my desk and retrieved the notebook I had stopped writing in. It wasn't as empty as I'd thought. Old habits. I prepared the letter over 2 days. Not in anger. In the same way I used to prepare reports at work, with care and specificity. I listed the original arrangement. I listed the duration. I listed the total household expenditure over the 9 months they'd been living with me. The number came to just over $22,000 when I included the renovation, the electrical work, the increased utilities, and the credit card charges. I noted that their contribution to this total was 0. I wrote that the arrangement would be concluding and that I was giving them 60 days' notice beginning September 1st, which meant they would need to have made other arrangements by October 31st. I printed it. I signed it. I put it in an envelope. I gave it to Colleen on a Saturday morning when Trent was still asleep. She read it at the kitchen table while I made coffee. I watched her face go through several things. "This is formal," she said. "Yes," I said. "You really mean this?" "I do," she looked up. "Dad, we have a 4-month-old. I know. That's why I'm giving you 60 days instead of 30. She started crying, not performing, actually crying the way she used to cry as a child, suddenly and entirely. I sat across from her. I handed her a tea towel because that was what was nearest, and she took it and pressed it against her eyes. "I don't understand why it's come to this," she said. "I think you do," I said. "I think you've known for a while." She cried for a few more minutes. Then she said, quietly, "Trent isn't going to take this well. I know. He's going to make it difficult. I've thought about that." What followed over the next 2 weeks was a series of approaches that I imagine they'd planned together in the basement. The first was a campaign of helpfulness. Trent began doing dishes without being asked. He vacuumed the upstairs. He fixed a wobbly hinge on the back gate that had been loose for a year. He said good morning. He asked about my brother in Victoria. He was, in every surface way, the version of himself that a reasonable person might actually want in their house. I thanked him for each thing. I did not change the letter. The second approach was Colleen appearing in the kitchen one evening with a spreadsheet on her laptop. She'd listed their projected savings over the next 2 months. What Trent expected to earn once he found something, a general plan. I looked at it carefully. "This is thoughtful," I said. "We're not asking to stay forever," she said. "Just until we're stable." "Until you're stable" was the original plan, I said. "It's been 9 months. I don't think the timeline is actually something we can define from a spreadsheet." She closed the laptop. The third approach came on a Saturday afternoon in mid-September, and I did not see it coming. My front doorbell rang. I opened it to find my neighbor from 2 houses down, a woman named Beverly. No, wait, not that name. A woman named Sylvie, who I'd known for 12 years. She had a casserole. She looked embarrassed. Behind her on the sidewalk were 3 more neighbors, including the Oduyas from next door, and a man named Fletcher who lived at the corner and had helped me stack firewood last autumn. They all had that specific expression of people who have been asked to do something they weren't entirely sure about but had committed to anyway. "Richard," Sylvie began. "No, I am Richard in this story. My name in this story is Ted. No, Ted is on the list. My name is Graham." "Graham," Sylvie said. "We came because we're a little worried." I looked past her at the others. Colleen was not visible, but I had no doubt she was watching from somewhere. "That's kind," I said. "Come in." They didn't all come in. Sylvie did, and the Oduyas, who I genuinely liked, and Fletcher stood in the doorway. Sylvie set the casserole on the counter and began, carefully, to explain that Colleen had come to them. She was worried about me. She'd said I'd been acting strangely since Sheila died, that I was becoming isolated, that the notice I'd given them was not really about the practical situation, but about grief that had turned into something else. Grief that had turned into something else. I let her finish. I made tea. I sat across from Sylvie and the Oduyas at my kitchen table. Fletcher had retreated to just inside the doorway, still not sure if he should have come. "I appreciate you all coming," I said. "I know this was uncomfortable, and I know she asked you because she thought it would matter to me. She's right. It does matter to me. You're my neighbors. I've known some of you for over a decade." Sylvie nodded with the careful encouragement of someone relieved the conversation was going smoothly. "Can I show you something?" I said. I got the folder. I had kept it in my desk, organized by month, the way I used to organize client files when I was working. I laid it on the table. Grocery receipts, utility comparisons, my bills from the 3 years before they moved in versus the 9 months since. The credit card statements with the charges highlighted. The renovation invoice, the electrical invoice. The total, written clearly at the bottom in my handwriting, $22,340 over 9 months. One spouse employed. One spouse not seeking employment in any way I could observe. Contribution to household, 0. Then I opened my phone. I had not planned to use the recording. I had made it almost by accident in August, when I'd started leaving my phone face down on the counter, with the voice memo running during the evenings, because I had started to feel like I was losing track of what was actually happening, whether my perception of things was accurate. It's an unsettling feeling to not trust your own read of a situation in your own home. I had started recording to reassure myself. I played them 40 seconds. Trent's voice, clear enough, telling me to keep it down at my own dinner table. Then, a few minutes later, the sound of my daughter saying nothing when she should have said something. The kitchen was very quiet. "I'm not in grief," I said. "I am very much in grief. Sheila has been gone for 4 years and I think about her every day. But the notice I gave my daughter has nothing to do with that, and everything to do with what you just heard and what you just read." Mrs. Oduya looked at her husband. Fletcher, in the doorway, had taken his hands out of his pockets. "I had no idea," Sylvie said softly. "I know, because Colleen is my daughter and I love her, and I have not spoken badly of this situation to anyone outside this house." She did not extend me the same courtesy. Sylvie looked mortified. The Oduyas were quiet in the careful way of people who are recalibrating. Fletcher said from the doorway, "I'm sorry, Graham. I shouldn't have come." "I'm glad you came," I said, "because now you know the truth of it, and if she comes to you again, you'll have the full picture." They left soon after. Sylvie squeezed my arm on the way out and left the casserole, which was a chicken and rice thing that was actually quite good. Colleen came upstairs an hour later. She had the baby on her hip. Her face was the face of someone who has bet on a particular outcome and watched it fail. "What did you say to them?" she said. "The truth. You showed them our finances?" "I showed them mine. The finances are mine." She shifted the baby to her other hip. The baby, for her part, grabbed at Colleen's hair, with the cheerful indifference of someone who had not yet learned to carry a side. "This is humiliating," Colleen said. "Yes," I agreed. "I imagine it is." She stared at me. I think she was waiting for me to qualify it, to soften it, to take it back. I didn't. "You've changed," she said. "I thought about that. Maybe I've stopped changing myself to suit the situation," I said. "It's possible those are the same thing from different angles." She went back downstairs. 2 days later, Trent came to find me in the garage where I was organizing some things I'd been putting off for months. He stood in the doorway. He was wearing actual proper clothes, which I noticed because it was unusual. and he was not carrying his phone. "I owe you an apology," he said. I put down what I was holding and gave him my attention. He said it wasn't easy for him to admit that he'd handled things badly, that the job situation had become a kind of weight that he'd responded to by retreating, and that he'd taken for granted things he shouldn't have. He said he knew the dinner comment was out of line. He said he was sorry. I listened to all of it. "I believe you mean that," I said. He looked slightly relieved. "The notice stands," I said. The relief receded. "I want Colleen and the baby to land somewhere good," I said. "And I want that to happen by the end of October. I'm not saying that to punish you, Trent. I'm saying it because this arrangement is not good for anyone in this house, including you. You've been living in my basement for 9 months, and you haven't had to face anything. That's not kindness on my part anymore. It's the opposite." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Where are we supposed to go?" "I've looked into this. There's a rent-geared-to-income program through the region of Halton for families with young children. There's also a nonprofit in Oakville that offers transitional housing support. I printed the information. It's on the kitchen table." He blinked. "You researched this?" "Of course I did. You're the father of my grandchild." He went back inside. I stood in the garage for a while, looking at Sheila's old garden tools still hanging on the pegboard where she'd left them. Her trowel. Her pruning shears with the red handle she'd bought because she could never find them otherwise. I left them where they were. The last weekend of October they moved out, not dramatically. A rented cargo van, a few trips, the gaming setup coming down in pieces the way it had gone up. Colleen carried the baby in the carrier on her chest. She made 2 trips with box after box of the baby things that had accumulated, the little onesies and the foam play mat, and the white noise machine I'd bought when the baby was having trouble sleeping, and Colleen looked like she was running on fumes. I helped carry boxes. We didn't talk much. At one point, she handed me the baby to hold while she folded down the stroller, and I stood in the driveway with this small person who smelled like baby powder and looked at me with large, unfocused eyes, and I said quietly to her, "You're going to be fine. Your mother loves you very much. Granddad loves you very much. That part doesn't change." Colleen came back for the stroller, and for a moment we were both just standing there in the October air. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the dinner. For not saying anything. I know. I'm not sorry for loving him. I'm not asking you to be." She put the stroller in the van. They drove away. That evening I called Kieran. He came down from Hamilton on the Friday night with a bottle of scotch, and we sat on the back porch with 2 glasses, and the barbecue cover still on because it was nearly November, and even I knew when to stop pretending it was summer. "So," he said. "So?" I said. "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. "Tired," I said. "Sad. A little lighter than I've been in a while." He nodded. We sat with that for a bit. "She'll come around," he said. "Maybe. I'm not going to wait for it." In November I called the realtor who'd left a card in my mailbox the previous spring. She was businesslike and prepared, and walked through every room with a clipboard, and said the words "excellent condition" and "strong market position," and "probably move quickly." The number she quoted made the $22,000 I'd spent feel, if not irrelevant, then at least part of a longer calculation that I'd been making for decades without realizing it. I thought about putting the house on the market. I thought about Kieran's spare room in Hamilton that he'd offered as a landing pad, while I figured out what came next. I thought about a trip Sheila and I had always meant to take to Newfoundland, the whole island, slow, in a car, stopping wherever we felt like. We never went. There was always a reason to wait. I took the listing paperwork home and set it on the kitchen table. I looked at it for 3 days. Then I called Kieran again. "What if I came to Hamilton for a while?" I said. "Not permanently, just for a while." "I've had your room ready since August," he said. In December, a couple from Burlington made an offer on the house that I accepted without significant negotiation, because the number was fair, and because I was done negotiating for the sake of negotiating. The closing was set for February. That gave me 3 months to sort through 31 years of a life that Sheila and I had built together in these rooms. I gave away a great deal. The good towels I kept. The garden tools I kept. The cast iron pan that had been a wedding gift I kept. And the photo albums. And the small watercolor print of Lake Huron that had hung in the hallway since 1998, and that I'd stopped seeing years ago until one afternoon. While packing, I stood in front of it for a long time, seeing it again. Colleen called on a Sunday in January. First call since October, I answered. We talked for a long time. About the baby, who was growing and had recently discovered her feet with a sense of wonder that Colleen described in the patient and slightly amazed voice of a new parent who is still surprised that something this specific can feel this large. About Trent, who had found work, actual work, a logistics coordinator position with a company in Brampton that Colleen said he was taking seriously. About the apartment they'd found in Etobicoke, small but theirs. She didn't ask about the house. Dad, she said near the end of the call, I think I understand now what I didn't understand before. What's that? That you could love me and still say no. I thought those were the same thing for a while. I thought no meant you were choosing yourself over me. I sat with that for a moment. Outside the kitchen window, the backyard was covered in February snow, and the barbecue was a square white shape under its cover, and the whole yard was very still. Saying no, I said, was the most I could do for you by then. I'd run out of other ways. She was quiet. The baby looks like Sheila around the eyes, I said. I noticed it in the driveway. I heard her breath catch. I know, she said softly. I see it too. We said we'd talk again soon. I believed her for the first time in a long time. I closed up the house at the end of January, a week before the official closing date, because the new owners were flexible and I was ready. I drove the last load to Kieran's in Hamilton in the evening, coming down the QEW with the lake on my right, and the city lights spreading out ahead of me, and Sheila's cast iron pan wrapped in a tea towel in the back seat. Kieran had dinner on the stove when I arrived. He asked no questions that night. We ate and watched the hockey game, and I fell asleep in the spare room, which still smelled faintly of the cedar chest he'd had since university. And I did not wake up until 7:30 the following morning, when the light came through the east-facing window and lay across the floor like something deliberate. There is a version of this story where I tell you it all worked out exactly as it should, where Trent became a different person, and Colleen found her own voice, and the house sold for more than I expected, and I started that Newfoundland trip in the spring with nothing but clear skies. Some of those things are true. Some things are just what they are. The house sold. Kieran's spare room is comfortable and temporary, and that is fine. Colleen and I are talking again carefully, the way you talk after you've seen what the other person is capable of, and they've seen what you are. The baby grows. She has Sheila's eyes. I kept the garden tools. I don't have a garden anymore, at least not yet. But I kept them. Some things you hold on to not because of what they are, but because of what they mean you haven't lost.